Serious teachers, what's the worst thing a student did to you? I had a student run into me and bounce off of me. She then accused me of shoving her and hurting her back. I was relieved of my position and I resigned. Fortunately, the footage shows that I was hit by her, but I still lost my job. After an inquiry with the Texas Education Agency, they found I did nothing wrong and I got to keep my license. Fortunately, I was offered a position with a government contractor making more money with a lot less stress. I never want to step foot in a classroom as a teacher ever again. I taught toddlers, and they consistently wanted to sit in my lap. I had a few girls climb up in my lap, smile sweetly, and peel over me. It's amazing how a 5-gallon bladder fits in a pint-sized body. I've been mostly lucky, but I've had 2 bad ones, both while training. Both these were in Birmingham, UK. 1. A student aged 7 brought a Stanley knife into school and was taking it out of his pocket and messing with it while looking straight at me. It was pretty scary knowing he knew exactly what he was doing. 2. A very aggressive child attacked me, digging his nails into my arm and drawing blood. He then twisted my arm backwards. That was a fun report. I've also had a chair thrown at me. Fun times. A colleague was stalked by a kid. Found out where she lived, where she shopped, what her routine was. Used to get her friends to stand outside her house and harass her outside Tesco. She would make comments in class, such as, "Aren't green curtains nice?" knowing the teacher had green curtains. For example, it got so bad she got the police involved and ended up moving house. Scary stuff. My mom is a substitute teacher, and one kid took a particular disliking to her and somehow found out her home address. He started yelling it out loud during class the next day and telling the other kids to teach her a lesson. Thankfully, nothing ever came of it, but my mom was scared as hell for a while. The school did absolutely nothing, and she had to keep teaching him for several more weeks. A 14-year-old boy threatened to beat me up and get me after school when he stormed out to scream in the corridor. I had to lock the door. He then was pounding on the door and screaming at me. There was no phone in the room and teachers aren't allowed their mobiles on them. So one of the kids had to phone the office for someone to come help, as the other teacher in that corridor wasn't bothering. Nothing was done. A 6'3" kid shoved me out of the way when I said he couldn't go in a certain room. Nothing was done. I've caught countless teenage boys trying to look down my top or up my skirt, or they've been winking at me or making inappropriate comments. One kid sniffed a stool after I stood up, thought I wasn't looking. Nothing's even been done. There is no point reporting it. A friend of mine as a teacher is a rough neighborhood. One day immediately after school she got a call from the principal telling her to stay in her classroom with the door locked instead of leaving like she normally did. The police arrested one of her students who had bragged to another student about kidnapping the teacher. He was arrested waiting by her car with a knife and zip ties. I teach 6th grade, and for whatever reason there was a rumor going around that I was pregnant. I wasn't, but a student of mine put hand sanitizer in my coffee while I was in the hallway monitoring class change. She hoped it harmed me and what she thought was my unborn child. Luckily, another student came and told me what happened. The girl was given a 3-day suspension and stayed in my class the rest of the year. Just a lot of general disrespect and apathy towards anything educational, and that was about 90% of the students. Very little to no support from admin or district. They act and talk like they care about the kids. They have meetings and draft long, exhausting frameworks for teaching and classroom management. But when it comes to actually doing something about the problems facing teachers and helping the kids, they do nothing. This is why I switched over to special ed years ago. Totally different experience and meaningful education for students who, on average, are much more delightful to be around. Emo. When I was 8 months pregnant with my second child, a 10-year-old male student threw a desk at my stomach. I immediately used the call button to call the front office and ask for an administrator. The administrator came to the classroom. I was crying hysterically because I was hurt and worried about the baby. The administrator stood in the room, turned to me, and told me it was not okay to cry in front of the students, and asked what I did to make the students so upset. I found a new school at the end of that school year, and the baby was okay. She's now a thriving 6-year-old. I currently work in preschool and daycare, as well as being a nanny. I prefer younger children. I tried to branch out and teach older students once. It was unfortunately in a lower income area. It's very weird being bullied by a large 12-year-old over and over again. In preschool we had a child still in diapers, one of many unfortunately, as it's becoming a trend. She was being a bit bratty and clearly not liking me that day. I asked her if she had to potty. She looks right at me and poops herself, so that was fun. I was a professor for a short while before I noped out of there. I had a student hack into the lab cluster and encrypted the drive because he didn't like another student. Luckily, while I was trying to reason with him, my other students unencrypted the drive. He told me several times that he likes guns and does martial arts. If it was said in the hallway, I'd be like, okay man, but we weren't in the hallway. He was like 6 feet. Probably 200 pounds and yes, very fit. I'm a 5 feet 7 inches blonde girl with no upper body strength. I'm really weak. I was alone in the office with him with the door closed so he couldn't see the lab across the hall. Anyway, what really scared me was that the cops, who searched his apartment while I was talking to him, did find a bunch of guns and other paraphernalia. He was detained and then banned from campus because he got into it with the cops when they came to remove him. But that wasn't what made me nope out of there. But that also didn't happen to me directly. That was after a student shoved and kicked a staff member in the campus. Leadership hemmed and hawed and refused to do anything until there was proof. A student also came forward that he'd assaulted her. Still, that's just a he said, she said. He was only asked to leave after he started refusing to pay his tuition because colleges are right. I liked most of my students, but we have no tools to deal with students in crisis, and leadership is so afraid of bad press they'd rather keep it under wraps until someone gets hurt. Doubly so for a state university with a Republican state government. Wouldn't want to be accused of liberal bias and be proactive. Not to me, but I saw it go down. My next door neighbor teacher was on crutches after breaking her foot or ankle. I don't remember. This kid saw her coming and called her over. Then he took his water bottle and spilled it all around her so that she was basically stuck. He ran off laughing, calling us all everything but a child of God. We teachers got paper towels and cleaned it up, but it was horrifying. The reason he was mad, she made him turn in an assignment earlier that day. Same kid also pounded on a teacher's door so hard that he knocked a wall hanging down on her head, causing her to knock her teeth together so hard that she broke a tooth. He knew she was there. He knew about the wall hanging. He did not care. That kid walked across the stage at graduation 5 months later with the rest of them. Had this wicked manipulative student once who had a 136 IQ, but had zero work ethic. He was never humble about it though and constantly bragged about how genius he was. He got an F in math, but his teacher bent over backwards for him and said, I know you have 17 missing assignments, but if you just do this one project, I will excuse all of those assignments and give you a B for the year. I tried to encourage this student to do the project and he refused and told me I couldn't make him do anything. Eventually, I gave him an ultimatum and said he either had to do the project or go to the office because coming to class and doing nothing was unacceptable. He then started getting in my face, rambling on, trying to provoke a reaction out of me. I remember at one point he was like, I bet you would love to just snap and hit me right now. Then, when I called the office for the principal to come up, he said, you better watch yourself. The principal ended up not getting the child in trouble whatsoever. He didn't do the project, and he still got a B in the class. And that is why kids at the school I work at act the way they do. I had a third grader steal my car keys. I couldn't find them anywhere. When it came time for me to leave one afternoon, I figured I must have locked them in my car. After I paid for someone to unlock the car for me, I realized my keys were not there. I had to have someone drive me home. My spare keys were at my parents' house who lived several hours away. The next day I searched everywhere for my keys at school. Nowhere to be found. The third day of my bumming rides, a student told my little boy in our class was bragging about having my car keys. After a search of his bag, we found that yes, he did have my keys. His dad come to the school and pitched a fit saying it was just a prank, and his son technically didn't do anything wrong. This child's father is a cop too. I was a tutor for a high school's advanced ed program during college. One day near the end of the year, this 6'2" male student comes into the classroom and doesn't say anything, just sits at the row of computers lined near the back of the class. Since it was adjacent to the door, the teacher in charge starts asking him who he is and what he wants, but he doesn't say anything. This escalates to them shouting at the student to leave and finally calling the police officer that are assigned to the school, at which point the student finally gets up and looks down at the 5-foot teacher for a few seconds before leaving the room. Turns out one of the students was friends with him and told him to come, but it was a tense 5 minutes and some of the other students were visibly shaken up. High schooler here, but I can probably speak for some of the teachers at my school. I go to a public school K-12 in the middle of the country, and we are not in a nice area either. You could argue our school is a ghetto school. Gangs and gun threats, fights every class period. We have a few kids who got expelled for aggressive acts. I think that the worst part of teaching for all my teachers is the sheer disrespect of every child. Kids in my class have zero chill, and everyone hates the geometry teacher. I do, but not for who he is. He's just not a great teacher. But people talk over my biology teacher. My Spanish teacher is treated as a joke because she's not that tall. No one takes English seriously, etc, etc. I hope kids one day will grow up and learn how they're treating other people. What's better is most of them are religious. Aren't you supposed to treat everyone respectfully in any religion? I'm agnostic, but if my mom got wind of me doing anything the kids in my school are doing, I'd be sent into the earth. To all you teachers out there who are somehow still teaching even with how bad us children are, I really appreciate you. You guys have the most patience of anyone I'll ever know. Keep doing what you love, even if you're getting close to quitting, and if you're retired, I bet you have at least some fun stories to tell. Keep going. Thank you guys for fueling our education. This didn't happen to me, but the teacher next door, a kid wasn't paying attention, so she tapped him on the shoulder. He went home and told his mom the teacher slapped him. School started an investigation. None of the other students liked this kid and all told the admin that she merely tapped him on the shoulder and then followed it up with all the horrible stuff he did in class every day. The school told mom that they felt the teacher did nothing wrong. She called CPS on the teacher for abusing her son. CPS then has to come and do an investigation and also found nothing. So mom then calls the cops. Wasted everyone's time because she couldn't believe her son would lie and misbehave. I've changed so much and have matured so much over the years. To this day I wish I could find the teacher that I did this to and apologize profusely on how stupid I was, not blaming or excusing my behavior. However, my autism didn't help me at the time, and say geese this is really mean Cam 3124. Anyway, I was a freshman in high school. The whole student body consisted of maybe 400 students. That includes all freshmen senior. So if you do something, everyone knows. This teacher wasn't a teacher yet. He was there observing, so he can in fact become a teacher. He was very overweight. Well, I somehow found a YouTube video of him singing the Norma Norma song. He was dancing to it and everything. I showed everyone including him and laughed in his face. Like I said, to this day I think about how that might have affected him. He made a formal complaint against me and was never seen again. I'm sorry, Mr. Teacher. I think your name was Brandon. So if you ever see this, I'm sorry. This was a school in South Texas. This story is about the day I decided to quit teaching. For context, though not trying to reveal too much about the school or myself, I taught at a Title I high school in the South Bronx. All of that is just to say that the kids were frequently a lot to deal with. Disrespect and the potential for violence was just part of the job, and I had largely become indifferent to it in terms of how it made me feel, though many days were still very tough. That said, there came the day I reached my limit. Last period of the day, freshman class, so we're talking kids ranging from 14 to 16. About 15 minutes before the dismissal bell, an active shooter drill starts. These were unfortunately very common, however they were almost always announced to the staff ahead of time and you would never have one that late in the day. I almost immediately determined this was real, or at the very least that something very bad was going on somewhere in the building. We shared the building with 2 other schools. I go through the typical procedure and my co-teacher and I lock the doors, draw the shades, turn off the lights, and get the kids to take shelter out of the line of sight from the doors / under tables, etc. That's when the phones immediately come out. At first they are just texting whatever, it keeps them quiet at least, but then they start giggling and chatting, and horsing around, and cursing at each other. I of course am repeatedly trying to get them to quiet down as part of the drill. At this point it's been 10 minutes, and we are still in lockdown. These never go on that long, and we are now only 5 minutes from dismissal. This is most certainly a real event. At this point I have no choice but to tell them, look, I know you don't want to take this drill seriously, but I have to tell you they didn't warn us about this, and it's almost the end of last period. This is probably real. You need to be quiet and be still to stay safe. Nothing changes. They just keep making noise and Snapchatting and carrying on as my co-teacher, and I desperately try to get them to be quiet because you know they might get all of us mass murdered. Nope. But then last period ends. We've been in lockdown for 15 minutes. They must know at this point this is real. But hey, they have bad teenager lives to get to, and we are now wasting their very valuable time trying to keep them from getting murdered. So now the mean people of the group, of which there are about 10 with 1 to 2 ultra evil, starting trying to leave and complaining about how we aren't allowed to keep them there and how it's time to go home. I again remind them we can't leave because this is a real active shooter situation, which is why we are still in lockdown despite the day being over. Nope, nothing. Just making more of a scene as each second passes, keeping them away from talking to their bad friends about the stupid stuff they think is more important than their lives. I realize that I might very well die to try to save these kids, because obviously I can't not try to protect children. It's my job for one thing, and from a self-interest perspective I don't want to live in the social media nightmare of being the horrible teacher who didn't sacrifice their life so students could Snapchat. Fortunately, the lockdown ends about 5 minutes later, and we get the all clear. Turns out while there was a danger, it was more hypothetical in nature. I won't get into the details, but it was at that very moment I decided, nope, I'm out. I'm not dying, because these social media addicted kids don't even have self-preservation instincts. Quit at the end of that year, immediately after being granted tenure, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Being a teacher is horrible and can literally get you killed.